Welcome to Hancock's VMware Half Hour. And welcome back to another episode of Hancock's VMware Half Hour. Okay, so today's video, which may or may not be half an hour, don't know. I have already basically run through this, so I definitely know it works. What I need to think of in doing this is doing the same steps again to get to the same end result, obviously, for this video. And what am I doing today? Well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to have a little look at P2Vs, physical to virtual conversions. This is quite a popular topic, and still is. I think out of all the questions that I get asked, I think P2Vs and V2Vs are probably the biggest. Certainly I think that probably the most topical questions that we get, really, to be honest with you. And we're still getting them. And of course now migrating off VMware vSphere to other hypervisors. We're going to be doing an awful lot more migrations and V2Vs. But this is all about a P2V. And this P2V really centers around an old Dell XPS H2O. It's a beef of a workstation that comes with Microsoft Vista. And I know that some of you out there are probably going to be saying, why on earth are we bothering with this? I'll explain why I'm bothering with this. This really is in dedication to my father. My father died in November my father died in September 2023. And it's still, even though that it was in 2023, it's still quite raw, to be honest with you. But before my father died, he asked me, I've got one of these machines as well, actually. We both bought two in the day. They were quite expensive. They had dual NVIDIA 8800 GTX graphics cards in an SLI combination. They had a GIA PhysX card. So, you know, these were real big gaming machines. The cases on them are absolutely ridiculously heavy. And they actually basically came with a refrigerator, of a better word, inside, so that you could actually basically deliberately overclock the processor that was inside. Anyway, my father actually asked me before he died to take the PC away and to recover any photographs and any videos that were on there for the family. So this is long overdue. And it's something really that's been on my list for a very long time. Now, the very first thing that I did, let's get into the P2V. The very first thing they actually basically did, because of the machine's age and the fact that this particular machine uses a very strange raided function, or maybe not so strange, but it actually basically uses a raided function. I think it's striped, I think, on this particular machine. But it had an option basically with two WD Raptor disks in there, which were 10,000 RPM disks. So, you know, 10,000 RPM SATA disks in a workstation, you know, these things absolutely flew, and they still do. But really, it's time to move these on to somebody else that can utilize them. And I need the space to get to my turntable. So the very first thing that I did, and let me just show you, the very first thing that I actually wanted to do, because of the age of the machines, is I backed them up immediately. My father's name was Leonard, or Len. So he called his PC Lenhan. There's a Lenhan domain as well, all around that. So anyway, so the very first thing, and I've broken this particular video into 10 parts. And I'll chapterize them, or I'll put them into chapters so that you can jump to the chapter that you need to, that you want to have a little look at, and how we're going to do this. Now, I could use VMware vCenter Converter to do this. But for me to do that, and it means that I have to basically connect the machine to the network now, install VMware vCenter Converter, find a version of VMware vCenter Converter that's going to work with Microsoft Vista. And I could have done that, but I really wanted to show you a way as to how we can use a Windows backup and create a virtual machine from it. Now, there used to be tools a long time ago, VMware vCenter Converter. I still think to this day, I think has the hooks in it to take an Acronis image and convert that to a VMware virtual, a VMware vSphere virtual machine or workstation machine. However, that version of Acronis is long gone. And I think that it was only probably 8 or 9, and that had a very short life. So your ability these days really to convert from an actual image, and this does come up quite a lot. People basically have taken an image of their workstation for the last time, thrown away the workstation, don't have it physically anymore, but they do have the backup. So this is what we're going to do today. I'm going to work from a standard Windows image backup, and here it is. So if we actually basically have a little look, and it's a VHD. Now we could, if we wanted to, probably connect that to Hyper-V and do some stuff with it and boot it up that way, but I'm not interested in doing that. I'm interested in getting it to VMware vSphere, and I do this really with all my aging machines before I commit them to that IT graveyard. I convert them to a virtual machine, and then they get backed up and they get archived. And if I need to go back to that particular machine in the future, I can. So we're starting with a VHD. Now I know some of you out there are probably going to turn around and say, well, I can just right click that and mount it, and I can have a little look at the files and I can get those images off, etc. Yes, I could do that. However, I find personally that if I can actually basically start the machine, log into the machine, then I can actually basically easily find the photographs and the videos and have a little look at the software that my father was using, and any other bits and pieces that I actually need to recover from the machine. Also, it benefits you because you can actually basically see how I'm going to basically go from a VHD to a VMware vSphere working machine. And of course, this is Vista. I know some people out there will be poo-pooing this and going, oh, Vista's old and shouldn't be on your network and everything else. So, you know, I'm aware of all those dangers and limitations in the fact that Microsoft Vista, of course, isn't going to be patched, etc. But we're going to eventually, when we start this machine up, then we're going to basically apply some cautions as well. Okay, so this is actually going to rely on an old friend called StarWind. StarWind V2V Converter, virtual to virtual converter. Now, some of you out there will turn around and say, well, why don't you actually basically just use the local file, use StarWind V2V to create a VMware virtual machine directly? Well, I could, but it doesn't work. So this is the alternative way. And we've got about 10 steps here. So the very first step that we're looking at here is to get yourself a Windows backup, a VHD. So I'm going to select the location of the image to convert. So it's a local file. Local file on the local machine. Well, technically this is actually basically sitting on my NAS. It's about 200 and something gig. So I'm going to say next. It's going to ask me for the file name. Well, I know that the file name is actually basically, my keyboard is not working. It was working. Let's just try this. That's interesting. File name. Maybe it doesn't like, maybe I've got to do, yeah, all right, okay. So this is on Cyrus Mega NAS 3. I'm going to have to log in. I don't know why I'm going to have to log in because I've already actually logged into it, but maybe it just needs another. Okay, so this is actually sitting on backup, Windows backup. There's the VHD. I'm going to click open. Okay, so that's good. That's a good bit of news that it's actually recognizing file format Microsoft VHD growable image size 288 gig. And I'm going to click next. So my destination image, again, I'm going to select, this is what I was saying, remote VMware ESXi server or vCenter server. This is what I was saying here, that we could actually basically select that and it would create a VM. However, doesn't work. Take it from me, or if you don't believe me, try it yourself. So again, I'm going to select a local file. Next, I'm going to create a VMDK, because we want to get to a VMDK. I want to get to a VMware virtual machine disk. Now, all this does, just to clear this up, all StarWind V2V Converter does is just convert the bits and data from a VHD to a VMDK. It doesn't do anything else. So don't expect, when you've got the VMDK, that you can create a virtual machine in VMware vSphere or VMware Workstation, power on, and it'll work. But I can demonstrate and show you that exactly in about part 4. We need to do some other fettling configuration of the virtual machine, basically for us to do that. So again, all I'm using StarWind V2V Converter for is to actually basically just get me to a virtual machine disk. So later on, I can actually basically start manipulating that virtual machine disk and configuring it correctly so that we can boot it later. So we want a VMDK. I'm going to click next. I'm going to select a ESXi pre-allocated image. Don't want VMware Workstation, don't want a pre-allocated. I want an ESXi because I'm going to use VMware vCenter server. But you could follow exactly the same steps here that I'm doing by using VMware Workstation if you wanted. So I'm going to click next. Now I need to specify where I want this. Now, again, I'm going to specify another NAS, different NAS this time. Are you following? Lots of NASs here, lots of different logins, and I'll explain why when we start doing the conversion. Okay, VMware vSphere VMs, and I've created a folder called DAD VM. Save. Now, that's actually basically sitting on a NAS, which is NFS connected to our VMware vSphere servers. So that makes it a lot easier for me to do any data moving. You know, I could actually basically convert that to my local PC, but I want to get that to VMware vSphere eventually. So I'm going to convert from one NAS to another NAS, and the destination NAS is connected to VMware vSphere. And I'm going to click the button convert, and I'm going to sit there and wait. This is probably going to take about 3 hours. So I don't intend to sit here all day for 3 hours. I was going to go out and do some bees today, but the weather's windy. It's forecast with thunder and lightning. Bees don't like thunder and lightning. I don't like thunder and lightning. So it's a non-bee day. So I'm going to get a slurp of espresso a minute. And just to say that I believe that StarWind has now been acquired by Datacall. I don't know what the result, I don't know what's going to happen to StarWind V2V Converter. I don't really know what's going to happen to some of the StarWind products. But, you know, StarWind and we go back a very, very long time. If you Google around, you will probably find one of the very first videos I did about creating an iSCSI SAN using a StarWind iSCSI product that they had for free a long time ago. I think it wouldn't at all surprise me if it was 20 years ago. They've certainly been around for a very long time. You know, StarWind, I think StarWind VM and Vision Core, these were all companies that you know, really were created alongside VMware vSphere on VMware Workstation. Okay, so I'm going to bob off. We're already about 14 minutes in, but but I'm going to bob off. I'll speed all this up in post because I don't really think there's much point in capturing this, really, to be honest with you, and speeding it up in post. So I'll come back when this has been completed. So at the moment we're in part 2, the conversion from VHD to VMDK using StarWind V2V Converter. And then I'll come back for part 3 when I'll show you how we create that VMware virtual machine using our VMDK, our strangely named VMDK, which is currently called, if we have a little look at the folder here, it's currently basically done 300 meg, so it's going to take a while to go through and do that. 288 gig file, and we're at 3%. So at the moment we've done about 300 meg of it. Okay, so I'll come back for part 3 when we create the VMware virtual machine. So I'll catch you, well, you'll just see it flow into part 3, but I'm going to come back later on this afternoon, and we'll continue this. Okay, so I'm back. Okay, so in fact, actually, it only actually took about an hour to convert the VHD to a VMDK, a VMware machine disk. And the whole point of this is because we're going to create a virtual machine now. So I'm just going to, one of the other things that you will notice as well when StarWind V2V Converter finishes, it drops you to a browser based link when it's done it successfully. So if I have a little look back at what I called DAD VM, that now we've actually basically got a 301 gig approximately, probably 280 something gig flat VMDK. We've got a VMDK and a flat VMDK, so we've got an ESXi virtual machine. So with that now, I'm going to create a new virtual machine, which is quite straightforward, but I'll do this anyway and I'll show you. So create a new virtual machine. I'm going to call it Dad's PC A. I've already done one before, followed by next. I'm going to create it in the production cluster. Now I'm going to store this on my vSAN, only because it's a bit faster. ESXi 7.02 or later, followed by next. Now this is Windows, and this is Windows, Microsoft Windows Vista 32-bit. Yeah, it's not technically supported anymore, we know that. Followed by next. So I'm going to specify the LAN. Okay. CD-ROM drive, video card, I'm going to set to automatically detect settings. CPU, I'm going to give it 4 cores. Now, you know, this Microsoft Windows Vista VM, you know, this is going to fly. You know, the performance of this is going to be far better than what it ever was when it was a physical machine. Memory, I'm going to give it 8 gigs of memory. I'm not going to create a hard disk because I already have a hard disk, remember. So I'm going to add a new device, and I'm going to call it existing disk. I'm going to go to my data store, which has got my DAD VM, and I'm going to click it and say OK there. So that virtual machine disk that was created by StarWind V2V, that's now been attached to my virtual machine. So let's go through this. 4 cores, 8 gig. There's our disk, 287.968 gigs. Now, tip here, if you get an error message when you add the disk, or you don't actually basically see it say roughly what size it should be, which I think was about 288 gig, I think, is what StarWind V2V turned around and told us initially. If you don't actually basically see that there, then it's likely that it's not converted it successfully. One of the other things I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the SCSI controller, and I'm going to add, it's not actually letting me delete the SCSI controller. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create this VM, so I'm going to say next followed by finish. So that's actually created our virtual machine, and here is that virtual machine. Now there's one other thing I want to do, is I actually want to change I want to add another controller. I want to add an IDE controller, or I want to change the hard disk to IDE 1 or IDE 2. But what I'm going to do for the meantime, I'm just going to click cancel. And I'm just going to power it on because I wanted to demonstrate. So if I click power on, I just launch a web console. There we go. I just wanted to show you that and demonstrate. I'm just going to click. There we go. So I'm going to click. I'm just rebooting the machine here. So let me just. What I'm trying to do is just to basically get the boot menu up. Well, almost. Let's just try again one more time. There we go. So at the moment, it's actually basically booting from the Intel E1000 interface, as you saw. But I'm actually going to force it basically to run from the hard drive here. I'm going to hit enter. There we go. So it has not found any bootable sectors on that disk, and we're getting an operating system not found. And I just wanted to show you that, as I mentioned before, that all StarWind V2V Converter does is just basically really do a block copy and convert the file structure from a VHD to a VMDK. It doesn't mean to say that it can boot the operating system, because we still need to do some fettling. So this is part 4, booting the virtual machine, and now of course we've got absolutely nothing. So one of the things that we need is I'm going to go back and edit this virtual machine, because what we're going to use is we're going to use the Microsoft Vista cdrom or ISO that I have. So I'm just basically now going to go to my Microsoft folder, and I'm going to go to my OS folder, and any version of Vista is going to work. So here somewhere, if I can spell XP Vista Premium, okay, that's locked and loaded now in the CD-ROM drive. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a boot again. And of course, what's going to happen this time, of course, is that it's actually basically going to load and boot from that CD, just if we wanted to do an installation. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to use Microsoft's Windows Vista ISO. And I'm going to select repair, and I actually basically want it to repair the existing virtual machine structure, because I want to actually basically get the virtual machine to a point whereby we can try to boot it. So this is part 5, repairing the VMware virtual machine using a Microsoft Windows Vista. Now at this point, we're not going to have any mouse worky, because we've got no VMware tools at the moment, so I'm going to have to use the keyboard here. Okay, so if I do Alt and R, I'm not even sure whether or not I've actually basically got the focus here. Oops, I hit the wrong button then. That said install. That's not very good. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hit Control-Alt-Delete. Trying to work out how can. Let's go back. I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm just going to do a restart on this. Guest OS, power, reset. Yep. And let's just try that again. As I said, VMware Tools is not installed in the machine. I've not got no keyboard input. If I struggle with this, then what I am going to do, I'm going to flick to the VMware Workstation console because it has a better ability to actually basically control the virtual machine at this point without VMware Tools. But let's just try this again and try not to click too many buttons. So again, what we're doing here is we are repairing the Microsoft Vista installation so that we can actually basically move to part 6. So there we go. Now this doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. So let's do Alt and N, because what I want to do is an Alt and R. Repair. Okay, now that's interesting because it's not actually basically finding any operating system or partition size there at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just have a little look at a command prompt. So we can definitely see our virtual machine disk there. That's the disk that's been converted. So our Windows backup all that time back, which was a VHD, is now a virtual machine disk. So we can see that correctly there. So I'm just going to click X. I'm going to exit out of that. What I'm now going to do though is I'm going to just select Startup Repair. So I'm just going to say Startup Repair. And then it actually basically do its okay. To restart immediately, click Finish. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to power off this virtual machine. I'm going to power off. Yes. Now, of course, as it's actually a virtual machine, you know, we have got the power basically to do snapshots if we want. And we're going to probably create a snapshot later. But the first thing I want to do here now is I want to change that hard disk, and I want to force that to be an IDE disk, followed by OK. And let's have a little basically look at the settings. I don't need the data store ISO anymore, and I don't need the SCSI controller anymore. So 4 CPUs, 4 cores, 8 gig of RAM, 287 gig disk, VM network, client disk, auto settings, followed by OK. So we have repaired our Microsoft Windows Vista virtual machine. And now we're actually basically going to convert the virtual machine using VMware vCenter Converter Standalone. So in exactly the same way that we've used this before, we're going to connect to our VMware vCenter server using an administrative account. I'm going to find the VM, which we've called dad's PC-A, followed by next. It's actually going to retrieve the source machine information, so it's going to squirrel away. It's going to have a look at the disk. It's going to find that Windows Vista installation. Then we're going to specify the same cluster again. Our destination will be the same cluster. And I'm actually basically going to put it on, I'm going to do a conversion from our NAS because at the moment our virtual machine disk that we converted, remember, using StarWind V2V Converter, is on our NAS, attached to a configuration file which is sitting in VMware vSphere, and I'm going to use this converter program to do another V2V to our vSAN, only because it's slightly faster. So again, I'm going to specify a administrative account. I'm just actually happen to be using administrator at vSphere.local, but you can use anything you like, provided it's got admin permissions or access to VMware vCenter stuff. Followed by next. So I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Dad's PC-A1. It's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to specify a vSAN data store. Virtual machine, yeah, 19 will do. Just checking there. I'm going to put it on a different host. So I'm going to put it on number 8. vSAN data store, followed by next. Okay, so I'm going to have a little look. I'm not really going to change much there. I'm not going to install VMware tools. I'm going to do a disk-based copy, virtual disk. I'm going to change the interface to... Tell you what, I'm going to leave all that because I'll change that afterwards. I'm often very hesitant about changing anything within VMware vCenter Converter because I've personally noticed the more that you change here, the less chance of actually getting a conversion. So I'm just going to leave all that. Now I do know this is probably going to create a thick virtual machine on my vSAN, and that's not really best practice, but I'm not really going to worry about that for the moment. I just want to get to the point that I've actually basically got this machine booting as a virtual machine. Then we've got a lot more functions that we can actually basically do with a working bootable virtual machine. So I'm going to click next, and I'm going to click finish. And this is basically doing another V2V. But there's a difference when it's doing this V2V, because this V2V not only basically does it do this file copy operation of copying everything out of that original virtual machine disk that had that really funny long GUID type name to a properly named VMDK, which is probably going to be something like what I call the machine Dad's dash PC 1A. Well, there it is there. Look. So our source virtual machine Dad's PC-A1 is what the VMDK is going to be. The current VMDK is some weird, strange load of GUIDs that we started off with. So it's going to start this clone. Now I'm just actually waiting here. I'm going to waffle here for it to get to 1 to 4%, because when it's actually got most, in my experience, most virtual machine conversions fail in the first 1 to 4%. If we get beyond 4%, then there's a good chance that basically the virtual machine conversion is going to function correctly. And then at the other end, 96 to 100% is where potentially they can fail again with the misconfiguration. But we can maybe fettle with that, and we can sort that out. So this is just doing a conversion. Again, it's doing effectively a clone disk of the original VMDK, which was basically converted using StarWind V2V. VMware vCenter Converter is now doing a clone disk of that to Dad's PC-A1. But the difference that VMware vCenter Converter does is that it will actually basically make tweaks to the operating system disk by injecting the various drivers into the registry and copying files into that disk to allow it to boot. Now, StarWind V2V, to my knowledge, does not do that. All it really is doing is just changing the disk layout from a VHD to a VMDK. There's no conversion of the operating system inside, and that's what VMware vCenter Converter does. It actually basically converts the operating system so it can run in a virtual environment. So again, we've got another long wait. This is probably going to take an hour or 2 hours to do. So I'll come back when this is done, and we will continue with parts 7, where hopefully VMware vCenter Converter has converted our machine, configured our machine, injected all these drivers in, and we can boot it for the very first time in our virtual environment. So we've got 2%. Tell you what, I'm going to have a slurp of Pepsi Max, my favourite soft drink of choice. Didn't win the Euro Millions last night, I don't think. It was 202 million. And not had an email through yet telling me that I'm the successful winner of 202 million. So I'll have to carry on creating YouTube videos, I'm afraid. Okay, so I'm going to bob off, and we'll come back in... I'm not quite sure really. I tell you what, we'll let this run. We'll speed this up in post, and I will I'll disappear. So, sometime later that day, in fact, actually, if you've ever done VMware vCenter Converter, then the running time to complete the job is often a little bit all over the place, really, to be honest with you. We were seeing a conversion time of finishing sometime at 7 o'clock, sometimes at 8 o'clock. But it's finally finished at 6:46, as you can see, and it took 3 hours and 58 minutes. Now, what that's actually done, let's just to recap in this part 6, we've used VMware vCenter Converter Standalone to effectively do a V2V, or a conversion of the virtual machine that I created. I added the existing disk that was converted using StarWind V2V. Of course, remember that we actually basically booted that. It didn't boot. We repaired that using a Microsoft Windows Vista ISO. And now we've actually basically converted the virtual machine to a backup image. More importantly, it's actually completed. We've got a green tick. It's actually got to 100%. And if we actually basically have a little look at, it started the cloning of the disk, it's completed the cloning of the disk, it's updated the boot sectors on the destination machine, it's processed the reconfiguration data store, it's applied the configuration, and it's reconfigured it completed. Now, the reconfiguration effectively is the injecting of the drivers into the registry and also copying any drivers that are required. So with all that, if I just go back to our new VM, which was called, if I just turn that off so you can see, it was called Dad's PC-A1. Now, of course, the data store I actually basically used was a vSAN data store as well. And you may remember that I actually sort of kind of said to you that I don't really like basically doing an awful lot of changes within the virtual machine, within the conversion, because obviously the more tweaks that you apply in a conversion, sometimes VMware vCenter Converter just basically craps out. So I'm now going to change the interface back to VM network. And I'm just really going to have a little look at, okay, so I'm going to change that. So I've got 4 CPUs, 4 cores per socket, memory, so I'm going to change the memory to 8 gig. I'm going to up that a bit. We've got our original disk there. It's probably created, I'm just having a little look, IDE 0. So there's a disk there. I can't see if that's created a thick disk or not, but I'm going to have to check that in a minute. Client device, we don't need a cdrom. Video card set to auto settings, and I'm going to click OK. So here's the test. Here really is the test. If the conversion has completed successfully, now when I click power on, I'm hoping that I don't get a blue screen of death, and I'm hoping that we actually basically start to see a Microsoft Windows Vista booting, which we are seeing. Now, this has got no VMware tools injected into it currently. So we're definitely going to have issues getting a mouse and keyboard working properly, I think, in the console here. But we'll have a little look. If we actually basically struggle with the graphical user interface, and there we go, there's the lovely Windows logo. Now let's have a little look, see if we've got any mouse action in here. No, I didn't think that I would, because I haven't actually got VMware tools installed yet. And of course, this is the first time that the machine is being powered on. So we're probably not going to have any networking at the moment. And certainly we're probably not going to keyboard or mouse input either, as plug and play is happening for the very first time. What I am going to do, though, because this is a virtual machine, I am basically just going to snapshot it as we've just powered this on. So I'm going to take a snapshot. So that if I break the virtual machine with any of the changes that I've made, there we go. That's what I was waiting for to see there. Thick provision, lazy zeroed, not recommended really on vSAN data store. I'm going to get some warnings later about that. So later on, I need to basically create a thin version of that. I can do that via storage via motion later. So what I'm going to do, I've got a snapshot and I've got no mouse. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the remote web console, which is in VMware Workstation, and generally we can get a mouse working in here. Just excuse me a minute, I've got a frog in my throat a minute. I'm back, sorry about that. I had a curry for tea, and I think the chilies dried out the back of my throat and just making me difficult talking. Okay, so surprise, surprise, I happen to know what my father's password was. That wouldn't really been much of a problem. So this is the very first time that we are logging into this Microsoft Windows Vista Ultimate, that we have successfully completed our P2V using a Windows backup image, but currently it doesn't have VMware tools installed. It doesn't have any networking, because the current network, I believe, Doesn't have any of the drivers, although in fact, actually looking there, that looks like it's got a network interface that's come up. So let's have a little look if that's true. Just going to check to see whether or not that it's actually got. Okay, so it doesn't actually have an IP address at the moment. So doesn't have VMware tools installed. I'm just going to go back and have a little look at the edit settings, see what networking it's got at the moment. It's got an E1000 interface, so we'll get that changed over shortly. But one of the things that this does allow me, I tell you what I'm going to do, because that display there is absolutely ridiculously tiny. So just let me fettle with this. Hang on. Okay, just so that we can easily see. So I'm going to click sign out of that. I'm going to click cancel for the moment on this. Everything that's just slowly just booting up. Okay, now I know that this is potentially a risk because, of course, Microsoft Vista, of course, went out of support a long time ago. But I'm pretty certain, because I've actually basically started up this virtual machine, I've checked it out, that there is no particular Trojans on there at the moment, no malware or anything like that. So that's something really just as a caveat to remind you that, you know, these legacy operating systems, you know, they're not going to have patches for current malware, Trojans, viruses, etc. So the first thing really that we need to do is we need to get VMware tools on this. One, so that we get a better video display, and we can get proper networking using the VMX-Net 3, and more importantly, we can get some mouse and keyboard operating correctly as well. So I have downloaded the appropriate VMware tools. Now, of course, don't be thinking for one moment that the latest tools on your... So I've already downloaded these. We have a checklist here in the office of matching virtual tools versions against operating systems. We do a lot of conversions, and a lot of conversions to legacy operating systems. So I know that VMware Tools 11.06 is compatible with Microsoft Windows Vista 32-bit. This is the 32-bit version. So I'm just going to click continue. If we actually try to install VMware Tools from our current ESXi server, it would not be compatible. I think the general rule is with VMware that once the operating system is no longer supported by the vendor, they no longer technically support the operating system in ESXi. So VMware Tools install, typical, next, install. When this is installed, we'll shut down, restart. Hopefully the VGA driver, the SVGA driver, that's used in VMware Tools will kick in. That'll resize the screen properly. We'll get we'll get the mouse driver installed. We'll get the keyboard driver installed. It'll start services, and then we can basically just use the virtual machine like normal. And I'm reversing the order slightly because I'm looking at my steps here that I've already drafted for this. So we're in part 7, which is installing VMware Tools, and then what I'm going to do in part 8 is I'm going to drop in a VMX-Net 3 interface, because now that's actually supported by VMware Tools. So I'm going to click finish, and I'm going to click yes to restart. So that's going to shut down, restart. Hopefully when it starts up again, we will hopefully see a change of screen resolution. I don't know what this is running in at the moment. It's probably running in 640 480 or something ridiculous like that, or maybe 1024 by 768 in, I don't know, 16 colors or something. So hopefully when the new driver gets installed, then it will automatically resize the screen, maybe, or maybe I've got to manually go in and do that in the operating system. We've got a black screen there at the moment. That's not looking too good. Maybe it's just sort of kind of thinking about it and it's initializing things. There we go. There's our lovely. That looks to me like the resolution's changed there. That looks like we're now running in what used to be called true color, rather than 16-bit color. I don't know. We'll see. I would have thought by now that we'd have got some sort of kind of resize action going on. Maybe it's just taking its time, or it hasn't really basically thought about it yet. Let's have a little look. If I go to properties, if I go to personalize, I think it's personalize, display settings, and okay, 800 by 600, so let's just increase to about 19. Let's do 1600 by 1200 highest. Click apply. Yes, there we go. That's a better screen resolution basically for us to be playing in. Okay, so all is looking good so far. We've got a Microsoft Windows Vista Ultimate booted, and if I just basically select properties there, Windows Vista Ultimate, 8 gig, 32-bit operating system, 3 days until automatic activation. Activate Windows now. Now, of course, we would expect that we've broken Windows activation here. You know, we've actually basically effectively physically moved this from a Dell XPS 720 H2C, I think it is, not a H2O, I think it's a H2C. So because we've actually basically done that change, then we're going to break activation. I have a feeling that these were probably originally shipped with an OEM version. So that's probably going to give us a little bit of problem in the future. But only saying that we won't be able to activate it. But to be honest, all I'm really doing is just saving this machine as a virtual machine, so that I can actually basically just inspect and get some files off it. So a couple more tweaks to do. I want to, so if I just basically turn that off for the moment, I'm going to go back to the VM itself, and I'm going to click Edit Settings. I'm going to add another network adapter. This time the network adapter is going to be the VMX-Net 3. I'm going to delete the old adapter, and I'm going to click OK. That's going to do a bit of plug and play. If I just basically go back to, our console virtual machine. Okay, you can see here VMX-Net 3 Ethernet adapter has basically been installed. So if I basically just now run and do an IP config, I should have an IP address there. I do, 141.255.136.115. And if I have a little look up there, then that network's connected as well. So there we go, part 8 completed. I'm just actually going to change the order of these in my steps. Okay, so probably don't really need to use the workstation console anymore, because we can use the grown-up web console. And if I just turn that off, then you can basically see the web console that we've got here, and I've got full ability with the mouse and keyboard and that, and that's all working. We got the VMX-Net 3 interfaces done, and I think, and I just click close on that, get rid of that orange, and I think at that point, that's where a lot of people think that their physical to virtual or virtual to virtual conversion is finished, and it's not. A lot of people forget, and just let me find a command that I need a minute. Hey, I needed to dig up some information, some old-fashioned information. This is how we used to do it. Administrative command prompt. So effectively, right-click cmd.exe on the desktop. Create a shortcut for CMD. Right-click, run as administrator. Job done. So this is how we used to get rid of phantom devices or ghost devices in Device Manager. So if we go up to View and we say Show Hidden Devices, it will show the devices that no longer exist. But even if you go to Device Manager and say Show Hidden Devices, it doesn't really show them all. And let me just give you an idea of disk drives, for instance. We've got one disk drive there. So what we really do need to do, we need to turn on an option. And that option is set DEVMGR underscore show underscore non present underscore DEVICES equals 1, and then we actually basically run dev mgmt.msc. Now, once upon a time in the dark ages, this is what we used to do. And then we go to View, Show Hidden Devices, and now if you basically have a little look in disk drives, you can see all the old drivers left over from every single thing that you've actually basically connected to this PC. Now, my father had this PC for a long time before he died. It was purchased brand new when the Dell XPS 720H2C hit the shelves, and you know, he used it every day up until his death, sadly, in 2023. And that's still pretty raw, and this is really why I'm doing this video, in memory of my father, and also to recover some of those important photos that some of us have never seen, that are squirreled away on this particular machine. So, you know, this this has a history, if you like. The registry itself has a history of every single device that was connected to this particular machine. And as I was sort of kind of saying to you before about the fact that, you know, this had an Aegea PhysX PCI card in the original. It does. In fact, I took it out and it's in my cupboard, because they're like rocking horse doo-doo, really. Like today, PhysX is actually basically carried out by the GPU, and our GPUs, really, a lot of them are underutilized, so we can actually basically do the PhysX calculations on a GPU with no ease. Back in the day, and as I mentioned before, if we have a scroll down here and have a little look at the display adapters, you will see here that there were two NVIDIA 88 GTXs in this particular machine as well. So this had a dedicated card to do PhysX. It didn't actually use the NVIDIA GeForce graphics cards to do PhysX, because these were sold as a gaming rig, gaming PC. So traditionally, what we would do, we would right click and we would say uninstall. We would then say delete the driver software for this device. Now, if we really want to dot the I, cross the T, and do a proper P2V or a proper V2V, this is what you should be doing. There are so many organizations and admins today that when we actually basically go into troubleshoot virtual machines, we have a look immediately and see that it was a V2V or a P2V from somewhere. and we can see all those old drivers that have been installed, and sometimes that is the cause of the problem. So, you know, they need to be removed. You know, many years ago, a good friend and colleague, current vExpert, current VM Vanguard, Luciano, you know, otherwise known as Best Way on Experts Exchange, you know, he actually basically wrote a handful of scripts, and later on, you know, back in 2010, back in 2011, you know, there were people that actually basically wrote scripts and things that would allow you to easily remove the drivers. Now we have a Windows tool that can do it, and I'll show you that, which is makes things a lot quicker. So delete, okay. So a couple of other things I'm going to do. I'm just basically going to delete these graphics cards, and I'm going to delete the drivers for them as well. And you will find that, you know, when you're uninstalling devices, when you're uninstalling drivers, you know, things are going to sort of kind of halt and go a little bit slow. And it's really one of the reasons why that I'm actually basically running off a snapshot. So, you know, just in case, you know, I break and balk this machine, then I can revert back to a snapshot when it was actually working. So there we go. You may notice then it turned around and said you want to do a restart, and I'm going to uninstall that as well. Now I could sit here like we used to do in the old days, and I could start going through and uninstalling these devices, you know, one at a time. But, you know, it really gets a little bit tiring. And if you actually have a little look here in disk drives, and, you know, you can use forensic tools on Windows today, and you can have a look at the system hive and the software hive and things, and you can get this information out. So, you know, here is a list of every single USB and flash drive that was connected to this Microsoft Windows physical machine in the day. You know, and, you know, it really actually basically shows, you know, historically, you know, my father was, you know, although a lot older than me, and I really have to thank him for his own introduction into computing, you know, in the early 70s, you know, because I saw my first computer in about 1972, 1973, because my father brought them home, which was when I got my first hands-on ability at using, you know, computers in the day. You know, my father was a tech geek. He loved tech, a bit like me. You know, he had to have the latest tech, no matter what it was. You know, we had the latest Betamax video recorders when they came available. The latest video recorder, I think, was a Philips on a VS2000, some strange beast that you could turn over the tape and put it back in again and record on the other side. All sorts of weird stuff that, you know, we had. You know, we had, you know, probably the first CD players, you know, available, you know, to us, you know, in the village that we lived in. So he was a great tech person. He loved tech. So it's no surprise when you actually basically have a little look through everything that was connected to this machine. So you had an iPod, you had an Arcos PC hard drive, an audio player, Buffalo hard drive, Buffalo USB, Epson storage USB device, a Garmin flash drive, a Garmin SD card. What else have we got here? Photo Smart, HP USB, flash drive by HP, a V165, Lexar USB flash drives, a Maxtor USB drive, multi-flash. You know, this is interesting here. This is a Nokia N95. You know, that was the Nokia N95 communicator. You know, first PDA, there's an S60, NVIDIA Stripe, Patriot memory, Roku Achek mobile USB device, you know, Roche. I think that's blood sugar test monitor. SanDisk Cruiser, Sanyo Seagate expansion disk, Go Flex camcorders, Tech USB, TomToms, a couple of TomToms there. You know, so, you know, it's fascinating, you know, forensically, you know, what you can actually basically see that my father was, you know, doing with this PC. You know, it's almost like a legacy trip back all those, you know, years ago when my father was actually basically using his PC, you know, Road Angel Plus. I think that's some sort of GPS tracker cam safety road cam thing. I think that's what a road angel is. Maxtor personal media center monitors. Anyway, I'm going on. We could sit here all day long, but I think portable devices, iFi, Garmin Flash, loads of, well, there's a Nokia N95, there's Nokia N96 and 97. The Beatles, I know what the Beatles is. That's a dedicated little Apple USB flash drive that's got the Beatles music on it. It's a limited edition. So I think you're going to get the idea that if I was going to sit here all day removing these, I'll be here for hours. So what we're going to do, and this is sort of kind of, we didn't really have this back in the day when we were doing P2Vs initially. We had to do it that way. And then later on, scripts were developed. But, you know, eventually people actually basically wrote applications to do it. I think there are tools available in PowerShell to do it. And I think the WMI has some tools as well. Anyway, so there's a product called, or a software, free piece of software called DeviceCleanup. I'm going to run as administrator. I'm going to allow it to run. And what that's going to do, that's effectively going to completely run through, and it's going to show us all the devices that are currently phantom devices. And all I'm going to do is select devices, select all, devices, remove selected, and I'm just going to sit back and wait for it to remove 754 devices that have been connected to that physical PC in its time. So that's how many devices that were in use on that particular machine. And once this has been completed, what I'm going to do, I'm going to shut down and restart. I'm going to log in. I'm going to check to see whether or not that we don't have any blue screen of deaths. And if I'm satisfied that the virtual machine is now running quite happily, I'm then basically going to delete that snapshot. And we'll have a little look. We'll go back to the device manager, and we'll just see whether or not that all these devices have disappeared as well. So there we go. They've all gone. Wasn't that simple? Wasn't that quick? You know, like, as I said, I don't know how old the machine is, or how long it's been in use for. Okay, so let's just run device manager again. Okay, there's a couple of things there. There was a disabled Ethernet adapter there. So I'm going to delete that. There are a couple of other ones there as well from VMware Player. I didn't even know my father was using VMware Player, to be honest with you. Looks a bit cleaner now. Let's show hidden devices. And let's have a little look, see what we've got left. Okay, we've got a multifunction adapter. And again, I think this is because these are currently disabled. So that's why they're hanging around. But if we look in monitors, gone. If we look at disk drives, there never go. They've all gone. So with that, I'm going to click big X out of that. I'm going to shut down, and I'm going to restart. I'm going to click OK. We'll wait for that one to shut down and restart, and then we'll remove the snapshot at the end. As I said to you before, this is probably the fastest time that Microsoft Vista's ever ran in its life, because now basically it's got access to far better cores, better CPU instructions, although it probably can't use any of these modern CPU instructions anyway. It wouldn't have known about Xeon Broadwell, you know, when this was developed all those years ago. But certainly it's got access to more memory. It's got a faster I/O, and as I said to you, not going to be using this PC. The reason that this PC has been recovered is so that I can basically remove and copy some valuable photographs Yes, I could have done it the old-fashioned way. I could have used forensic tools basically to mount the image, get all those JPEGs off, but we wouldn't have been rewarded by having a little trip down memory lane, all those devices that my father connected to his PC. And there we go. We've finished. That's booted up correctly. So now I'm just going to finally shut down. Tell you what we'll do. I'll shut down this PC. I'm going to go back over here when that PC basically has shut down, and then what we'll do, we will just delete that snapshot. We'll power it back up again, just to prove and show that it's still working. Of course, we're getting this message about a new version of VMware Tools is available. Okay, so go to Snapshot, delete all snapshots, delete all. Have a little look. Remove all snapshots. Shouldn't take very long. I don't think it should take very long. It's sitting on a vSAN data store. So guest OS is being reported now properly as Microsoft Windows Vista 32-bit. Before it wasn't doing that. And it's still sitting there. That's a puzzle. Maybe I just need to be a little bit more patient. Okay, the snapshot's gone. In fact, actually, it was 49 gig. I was quite surprised how quickly it actually racked up to that many changes in such a short period of time. So it's 49 gig, the actual snapshot. So, well, snapshot's been removed. So I think I must have hit power on button twice there, because the first time it turned around, I didn't notice I'd clicked it the first time, and then the second time it turned around and said not allowed in this state. For a moment then I thought I'd balked it, but I think that's just clicking the button twice. Anyway, so our final time booting this Microsoft Windows Vista Ultimate machine and logging in, we are now snapshotless, if that's a word. So I've actually just got snapshots, no snapshot available, but of course that's not really a true sign of showing that we haven't got any snapshots. So if we just actually have a little look on our vSAN data store, and we have a little look at the folder, which was this one, and we can have a little look in here now that we don't have, all we have is a dad's PC-a1.vmdk, and that's it. We don't have any others, any snapshots. And there we are again, back at the login prompt, or back at the desktop of our Microsoft Windows Vista. So that's it, completed. Thanks, Dad. I've recovered your PC, which I promised you that I would. And I can get those photos off. So anyway, so just to recap, you know, these 11 sort of kind of parts that we've gone through in this video, which is probably going to be a fairly long one, I would think, probably a bit longer than the standard Hancock's VMware half hour. We've actually basically conducted a P2V, but rather than actually using a physical machine, what we've actually done is that we've used a Windows backup file, a VHD. In part 2, step 2, if you like, part 2, step 2, we use StarWind V2V Converter to convert the VHD to a virtual machine disk, a VMDK. I converted that, that just had to be on my NAS, but it could be anywhere. And why? Because I wanted to eventually get it to a VMware vSphere machine, we did that conversion to an NFS data store. I created a VMware virtual machine. I added that existing virtual disk to that machine, and I demonstrated in step 4. We booted that VMware virtual machine, and it didn't boot. And as I said to you, that the StarWind V2V converter process, all it actually basically does is effectively just a bit swap, if you like, to just change the geometry from a VHD to a VMDK so it could be understood by VMware, but that doesn't do anything to the internals of the operating system. So it's no surprise in step 4 that it wasn't going to boot. In step 5, we connected a Microsoft Windows Vista ISO to the virtual machine. We booted from that CD-ROM, and we used the startup repair function of that to rebuild the startup functionality. Now, the reason I did this, if I hadn't have done that, VMware Converter in the next step, in step 6, wouldn't have actually basically recognized that it was an operating system. So that's why it was important for me to do that repair. If you don't do that repair, then VMware Converter won't pick up that there's an operating system present. So then in option 6, we use VMware vCenter Converter to effectively do a proper conversion, a V2V conversion, from the existing VMware vSphere host infrastructure back to the same VMware vSphere infrastructure. But this time we actually basically decided to actually convert that to our vSAN data store. Just because our vSAN data stores here are faster, you could be using local disk or NVMe or SSD or standard RAID storage. It doesn't really matter. And then in part 7, because of course we were struggling with mouse and keyboard, because there's no VMware tools actually basically in the operating system, we had a network interface. We had an E1000 interface. If we didn't have an E1000 interface, if we had an E1000E, which is technically not supported by Microsoft Windows Vista, then we could have added one, but we already had one. So we had some networking. That networking allowed us to grab VMware tools off our NAS. As I said to you, we already have a big long list here of versions of VMware tools that match operating systems. So don't try and install the latest VMware tools on Microsoft Vista or XP or Windows 2000 or Windows 7. They're not going to work. You need to basically find the right version of VMware tools from packages.vmware.com to be able to install on your guest operating system. So in part 7, we installed VMware tools. In step 8, we added a VMX-Net 3 interface, and we removed the E1000 interface. Everybody should be using the VMX-Net 3 interface, or even the VMX-Net 2 interface in your virtual machines. You should only really be using the E1000 really to install the operating system. And of course you need VMware tools to support VMX-Net 3 as well. So moving on to part 9, or step 9, something that's often missed in P2V and V2V conversions. We removed the third-party ghost hardware drivers, and I actually showed you that we did it the old-fashioned way by effectively setting the environment variable dev mgr underscore show underscore non-present underscore devices equals 1 in an administrative command prompt, of course. And then we actually started up dev mgmt.msc, and I basically went through the devices, and I showed you some of the legacy hardware that my father had lovingly connected to his Dell XPS 720 H2C for many years. Then I actually basically showed you that we could use the tool, magic little tool that we ran that removed 750 phantom drivers with ease. We shut down, we restarted, we then removed the snapshot, and when we started up again. And here we are. That's a long one, that. Anyway, so what can I say? In memory of my father, deeply missed, really missed. But anyway, thank you very much for watching another episode of Hancock's VMware Half Hour. I'll put some chapters in this video so that you can jump to points in the video and take away some golden nuggets that hopefully will help you with your P2Vs or V2Vs in the future. This is how we do it. There is no magic sometimes. We just have to basically do some conversions, and we have to think through the problems. If you've liked this video, then please give me a good thumbs up. And if you don't like it, then give me a thumbs down and don't like it. But don't forget to subscribe and share, and I'll see you again in the future for another video by me, Andrew Hancock, at Hancock's VMware Half Hour. So all the best now. Go safe. Good night.